Well, I don't like to do this on a normal occasion. In fact, it's going to be a little bit different this morning, so just bear with me. But I find myself doing this a little bit more in my prayers than I do from the pulpit. But what I'd like to do that's different, that's a little bit troubling for me this morning is I need to confess some things to you. Okay, so just to bear with me through a time of confession this morning. Here's the deal. I really don't like Christmas. Man, don't shoot me. All right, to throw tomatoes. I'm not, I'm not sure like when it started, or how it started, or why. I think I know why it's this way, but I'm not like, we don't hang lights on our house, and it's not because my kids don't want me to. We've got a really nice wreath on the front door, like a really nice wreath. So grateful for that. I grew up in Wisconsin, and every year at Thanksgiving, Thursday, everybody's together, we're eating. They come to our house, it's wonderful. The day after Thanksgiving, we take the entire day and we go through all the Christmas lights. And my grandfather's a military guy, paratrooper, mortar Marine, God rest his soul. He makes sure every single bulb is working, and I'm just sitting there making sure Grandpa can fix all these lights. That's Friday after Thanksgiving. Saturday after Thanksgiving, reminds you, it's like usually about single-digit temperatures outside or negative temperatures. We got hand warmers. We're bundled outside, and I'm just holding strands of lights as Grandpa kind of runs them wherever he wants to, freezing my tail off. I don't have fond memories of hanging lights. There's probably some traumatic things that I need to work through. I'm just confessing these things to you. I don't know what to do during the holidays. Like, what am I supposed to do? Sit around? Just talk to people? I've got stuff to do. I don't know how to be still, I got things, I got people to go, places to go, all that kind of stuff. So somebody's always disappointed. How can you be disappointed at Christmas time? You got days off of work, you got days off of school. Somebody's always disappointed at Christmas. Like, it's Christmas. Don't be disappointed. This is America. It's amazing. Land of the free, home of the brave. So I'm kind of like, I'm a little bit of a Grinch, and I'm not saying that because I'm proud of it. I'm saying it because I need your help. The first step to solving a problem is admitting that you got one, right? The denial isn't just a river in Egypt. So, but I love this. I found this quote, and I love what Hollywood and what Dr. Seuss has done with the Grinch, because, that's kind of me, man. That's like, I love what he says at the end of The Grinch. He puzzled and puzzled till his puzzler was sore. And he thought of something that he's never thought of before. So here's the deal. I'm sitting up here. I want to get more out of Christmas. I really do. I want to think better about Christmas. I want to enjoy Christmas more, and I want you to as well. And so this morning we're going to take a look at Micah chapter 5, and I want us all to just think differently about Christmas. Okay, we're going to look at three things from this text, just really straightforward. This passage is probably very familiar to you, and it's all about the reason for Christmas. It's all about getting beyond the surface level kind of things that we deal with in our culture. His puzzler was sore. I want to look at three things in Micah chapter 5, verses 1 through 5. Number one, these three things are all about the Messiah. Who will he be? Number two, what will he do? And number three, how is he going to bless us? Like, why does it even matter? Number one, who will he be? Number two, what will he do? Speaking of this Messiah. And number three, how will he bless us? Number one, who will he be? Look down at your text, Micah 5, verses 1 through 3. Are we still friends? Alex, we still friends, man? We're so good? All right, man. We could talk after. It's all good. Micah 5, verse 1. You might have a little footnote that this is, there's a verse 2 in some of the Hebrew manuscripts, but I'm going to start where it says, muster your troops. Now, muster your troops, O daughter of troops. Siege is laid against us. With a rod they strike the judge of Israel on the cheek. But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, you who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient days. Therefore he shall give them up until the time when she who is in labor has given birth. Then the rest of his brothers shall return to the people of Israel. Now, Micah 5 is one of the greatest hope-filled chapters in all of Scripture. But it really doesn't start with a lot of hope. It starts with a lot of bleak, dark circumstances. Muster your troops, O daughter of troops. Siege is laid against us. This is the city of Jerusalem is being besieged. It's being surrounded by an enemy army, and there's nothing to do for the people except to just try to fight against them. Notice Judah is referred to here as the daughter of troops, or the daughter of soldiers, your text might say. The title goes back to Micah 4, verse 13, where there it's mentioned there's another description, a title for the people of Judah, called the daughter of Zion. Bat Zion is how you would say that in Hebrew. Micah wants his readers to think about the metaphor of family here, and he specifically wants you to think about the relationship of God to his people in terms of the relationship of a father to a daughter. A father to a daughter. It's an endearing term. In the ancient Near East, a daughter is a father's most precious possession, but also the most vulnerable. A daughter was protected in her father's house until she was married. A daughter is cared for. She was an extension of the father's home, honored, loved, and cared for in that way. But historically, the daughter of God, if you want to take this metaphor to the next step, the daughter of God disgraced the family name. The daughter of God went her own way instead of doing what her father, God, wanted her to do. She did her own way in her own things, and that was sinful against the father. And so now there's condemnation. There's judgment that's coming to a family situation. So as Micah 5 opens, the situation from Judah and for Jerusalem, it's bleak. It's very hopeless. But the end of verse 1 depicts the king who has not only been defeated, but humiliated. It's going to say something like this. With a rod, shevet, in Hebrew, they strike the judge, shofet. And that wordplay there, don't miss it in Hebrew. It's designed to be a very ironic and intentional and humiliating wordplay. The judge in Israel was the one with power. He was supreme. He ruled over Israel with righteousness and justice. And here, the very scepter, the rod that symbolizes his power and his justice, is being used against him. A very humiliating situation. Interestingly, verse 1 was literally fulfilled in history, about 115 years after this was written. In 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians stormed the gates of Jerusalem. They surrounded the city. And Nebuchadnezzar literally took Jerusalem, the city, for himself. He burned the gates with fire. He destroyed the temple. He carried off the people back into exile, back into Babylon. Judah's king at that time was a man by the name of Zedekiah. And when they took him, they struck him over and over again. And they blinded him so that he could no longer see. Right before that, they did unthinkable things. Your text will go into some of the details there. He was struck so badly, tortured by his captors, that he was blinded in exile. And so verse 1 basically starts something like this. Judah, Jerusalem, I wanted you to be my daughter, my faithful daughter. Because you haven't been faithful now, a nation that's much stronger than you, ruthless, a pagan nation, is going to come and surround you and is going to take you off into captivity. Hopefully this will all be for the purpose of bringing you back one day to faithfulness and to a relationship with me. Verse 2 is a major contrast, a huge contrast in verse 2. Everything changes when it shifts from verse 1 to verse 2. But you, O Bethlehem of Ephrathah. A major contrast. Beit Lechem literally means house of bread in Hebrew. Ephrathah means fruitful. This house that was a house of bread would also produce fruit for the nation of Israel and for the people of Judah. It says, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah. Bethlehem is a very small rural town. It's 5 miles southwest of Jerusalem. There's no political significance. There's no reason that it would be important. It's a very marginal, insignificant rural town. And this is why we sing at Christmas time, "O great town of Bethlehem." No, it's "O little town of Bethlehem." Very small and insignificant, and includes one of the most endearing truths about all of Christmas and all of the Scripture when we dive into it. One of the things I love about family, one of the things that I've really enjoyed doing, Brandy and I will do this every so often. At nighttime, we've got these, have you ever heard of iPhones and iPads, different things like that? They can store all your pictures on them. It's crazy. So a lot of times we'll just sit back and we'll go through our pictures. You guys do this? And we go to the time when we took shots of the kids when they were really, really little and have all these great memories and pictures, and we think, man, what happened? How'd you grow up so fast? This is crazy. One of the things that we used to do when we were little, when the kids were little, is I would wrestle with the kids. We'd get on the floor almost on a nightly basis. It's like, all right, try to take out Dad. Let's go. And Henry would muster all of his strength at the age of 3. Every once in a while, there's a picture in my office, you can see this. Every once in a while, he'd get an instrument of warfare. He'd bring out a sword or something. And he would do all kinds of samurai moves with this sword, and he's like, come on, Dad, bring it on. I got you this time. Right? And so every time we'd start wrestling, we'd start doing something in the house or in the basement down there, just being crazy, and he would give me everything he's got. He's hanging on me, he's biting my ear, he's pinching me, trying to get me in any kind of hold, and then lo and behold, I would just, man, all right, it's go time, kiddo. It's time to remind you that I'm Dad and you're 3. And it was the most glorious moments of my life. It was wonderful. And Henry, every once in a while, he'd stand up and he'd show lightning and thunder. He'd be like, come on, Dad, what you got? What you got? And every time I'd have to remind him that I got a lot more than he does right now. Those days are pretty much shifting. When Henry was really small, when Ethan was really small, I was really big, you know? And I remember thinking to myself, you guys are just tiny. You're just so small. And you think you can take Dad? You're just tiny, tiny guys. Some of my favorite memories. Christmas reminds us all that God chooses the weak things of the world to shame the proud. God chooses the weak things of the world to shame the proud. The powerless things to magnify his strength. Bethlehem in Scripture is known as being this town that one of their other kings is from, King David. It's the birthplace and where he grew up. Even when the Davidic kings failed and died, one king after another king, the Son of God comes to resurrect this Davidic line, this promise that was given to David and to his sons thereafter. But here's what I love about the Bible too, because many people, they struggle with Jesus. Many people, especially in our modern culture, they say things like, listen, man, I know you're a Christian, and I appreciate Christianity, I do. How are you so confident that Jesus is actually God? Like, I can get to Christianity, I can get that it's a religion, kind of similar to other religions that are out there, but what I can't get to is, how can you be so certain that Jesus, this human man who lived about 2,000 years ago, is literally and truly God? And Scripture tells us over and over again, not just what the Messiah does, it tells us who the Messiah is, and it all leads to the person of Jesus. We get not just some details, we get a whole lot of details and prophecies concerning who the Messiah will be when he comes. We get information about what family he is in. He's in the family of Judah. What city he is born in. He is born in the city of Bethlehem. What gender he will be. He will be a male. How he will come into the world. He will be born in human flesh. when he comes into the world. We get something of God's eternity, that this will happen. This person will come who is from ancient of days, from days of old. And you can take those references in there when it talks about whose comings forth is from old, from ancient of days. You can take that as old times or ancient Davidic days, speaking either of the origins, that God is before all things. Before anything was created, God was there. In the beginning, God is how Genesis starts. We'll look at John's reference to that later on this evening. Or you can look at that Ancient of Days as alluding to David, the ancestry of David, this promise that was given to David back in 2 Samuel chapter 7. But over and over again, we get all these details, all these prophecies about the Messiah, and we see that Jesus fulfills every single one of those prophecies. In fact, scholars say that there's 200 prophecies in the Old Testament that are fulfilled by Jesus, anywhere from 200 to 400 if you include allusions to it. The Encyclopedia of Biblical Prophecy has 191 elements that are prophesied about the Messiah to come, all of those fulfilled in Jesus. Alfred Edersheim's New Testament Handbook, he references 456 passages in the Old Testament that all refer to details about Christ, who he is, what he's going to do, what he looks like, where he's from. Micah 5 is one of the clearest. Here we learn who the Messiah is. From the family of Judah, born in the city of Bethlehem. His beginnings are from the Ancient of Days, from long ago. Number one, who will he be? Number two, what will he do? What will the Messiah do? Look down at Micah chapter 4. Just going to read the beginning of verse 4, or chapter 5, beginning of verse 4, excuse me. It says this, it says, "And he," speaking of the Messiah, "shall stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God." The first thing God's shepherd king will do is he will stand and shepherd. And that might seem like a really odd thing to say. Okay, is this opposed to sitting and shepherding, or maybe laying down and shepherding? Why do we have this reference to the Messiah standing? He will stand and shepherd. That's a really unique description. Every major translation there is going to say something like stand or arise. The NET version is the only one that says something significantly different. And here's what it says. It says, he will assume his post. And here's what Micah is doing. He's picking up on two descriptions of what the Messiah will in fact do. Number one, he's standing. Number two is shepherding. And when it describes the Messiah as standing, that has to do with his protecting and his guarding of his sheep and his people. Number two, shepherding has to do with feeding and leading his people. The meaning of standing is more fully expressed in verses like Psalm 2, verse 9. It says that he will shepherd them with a rod of iron. Okay, the rod of iron is an instrument that's given to the highest in the land for the protection of the people. It's a symbol of his sovereignty, his power to rule because of his right and his responsibility to do so. Shepherding itself was a common image associated in the ancient Near East. Kings are often depicted as shepherds in the ancient Near East. You guys know the pictures of Pharaoh from Egypt, how he has the shepherd's crook, kind of those images you see of the coffin of Pharaoh that are very, very famous. In pastoral industry, raising sheep and goats and shepherding was significant to life and society and to the culture. Sheep and goats, their meat was cooked for food, their milk was used for dairy, their hide was used for leather, their wool was used for clothing. Everything about it sustained a society. It was a thankless, lonesome task to be a shepherd. Nonetheless, they carried on the infrastructure of society in that day. They helped society to function and provide the essential needs of the people at that time. These verses not only tell us what the Messiah will do, they also tell us how he's going to do it. The Messiah will shepherd in the strength of the Lord. He will shepherd in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. It kind of kills me to use this illustration, but I'm going to use it because it's Christmas. Hopefully I can get away with it. In 2020, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you guys know that team? You guys know why you need to be a Green Bay fan, right? It's because Christmas colors are supported by the Packers, all right? In 2020, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did something unprecedented. Perhaps it's been done before it, but never with quite this much success. They took a Hall of Fame quarterback that played almost his entire career for the New England Patriots. They thought he was done being a great player, Tom Brady, and a crazy thing happened. They brought him onto the team. He goes on in the very first year that he's with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the New England Patriots, he wins a Super Bowl. In 2021, almost the exact same thing happened with Matthew Stafford from the Detroit Lions. The Rams got Matthew Stafford, had a great career with the Detroit Lions. If he would have stopped with the Detroit Lions, everybody would have said Hall of Fame quarterback, and something crazy and amazing happened. The Rams won the Super Bowl that year with a brand new quarterback that came from another franchise. In 2023, the Jets did a similar thing, and a crazy thing happened. They took on Aaron Rodgers from the Green Bay Packers, and he tore his Achilles. He played 3 plays. All right. And so here's what happens. They should have learned from Brett Favre. How do you not learn that we give up all our washed-up players after the fact? Like, that's what we do in Green Bay. So I'm not a little stitious about sports. I'm superstitious about sports. So why did they not do something different? I don't know, but they did. Here's the deal. The Jets put a lot of stock in one guy. Their guy to get him to the Super Bowl was Aaron Rodgers. They trusted that Aaron Rodgers was going to be the guy to bring him there. They gave him the salary that he wanted in order to get him there. They built up their offensive line to get him the protection that he needed to get him to the Super Bowl. They built a great defense. The Jets still have a really good defense this year to get him to the Super Bowl. And they put all this trust, they put all this faith in one guy. And 3 plays in, he's out for the rest of the season. And that was it. The history of Israel and Judah is a story of king after king, leader after leader who put their faith in the wrong guy. They put their faith in the wrong things. The Messiah's strength in this passage, Micah 5, verse 4, it comes from a unique connection in a relationship to God the Father. The Messiah, when he comes, he will rule in the Father's strength, not in his own strength, but in God the Father's strength, not in his own abilities, but in God's abilities. While every other king was turning to alliances, to military, to human wisdom, the Messiah is depicted as turning to God and to God alone, trusting the Father alone for what he needed to do for his people. He's described as seeking, looking, trusting, relying on God, and turning all the wonderful traits that are associated with the name of God, his character and who he is, turning all of those traits into reasons to trust the Father and to believe the Father. Number 1, we're learning about who the Messiah will be. Number 2, we see what he will do. Number 3, what are the results? How is he going to bless his people? Look at the end of verse 4. And they shall dwell secure, for now he shall be great to the ends of the earth, and he shall be their peace. First, when the Messiah comes, his people will dwell securely. And the Hebrew is interesting there. It's actually only one Hebrew word. The verb is attached to the pronouns. It literally, when you read this in Hebrew, it says, they will dwell. That's all. Or you might read it, they will sit. And so translators supply an adverb there. They will dwell securely because of what the Messiah will do to iron out that translation. The Messiah will bless his people by ensuring that they live securely in the land. And this is a promise that goes back to David, back to the covenant that was given from God to David. 2 Samuel 7, verse 9 says, I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and I will plant them so that they may dwell in their own place and be disturbed no more. Violent men shall afflict them no more as formerly. And in the ancient Near East, here's what that means. Boundaries were very significant in the ancient Near East. In fact, you don't infringe upon the ancient boundaries that God has established. And he has established a land and a boundary for his people. Boundaries are important whether they're national boundaries, individual, or private boundaries. To violate a boundary was to violate something that God had ordained. And he establishes the boundaries of all people. He establishes the boundaries of the sea, the boundaries of the land, the earth and all of its borders. A man who moved the ancient boundary was cursed by the law. The Messiah comes along as one who will secure the boundary of his people. He will take care and bring people into the land. They will dwell there securely because of who he is. The Messiah not only brings them dwelling securely in the land, but also, number two, blesses his people with peace. And that's the Hebrew word for peace there is shalom. You've probably heard that before. Shalom is not just a friendly greeting when you read it in the Bible. It's not just the way that the Apostle Paul ends his letters, grace to you and peace to you. Shalom in the Bible is not just an absence of conflict. Shalom in the Bible represents so much more than that. Shalom is a new age of the Messiah. It's a time when the crooked things will be made straight, when rough places will be made smooth because of the King. Shalom is a time when dry and arid deserts will produce fruit and vegetation and spring forth, when the mountains will run with wine down to supply for the people. Shalom is a time when lambs will lie down with lions. All human beings will be knit together in brotherhood at the eternal shalom of God. They will walk with God. They will lean on God. They will rely on God. They will have perfect worship and fellowship with God. Shalom is a universal flourishing. It's a time that's yet to become of wholeness and delight. It's the way that God created the world to be in the first place. Perfect relationships with perfect peace, not only between other people, but peace between us, individuals, and God. After the Grinch succeeds at stealing Christmas, the Grinch stole everything about Christmas. He stole the presents, he stole the lights, he stole the trees. Remember? He put it all in that giant bag that he had, and he made his little dog run up the hill with it. I mean, I'm just telling you, like the Grinch. He took everything. He goes up on the top of the hill after he had stolen Christmas successfully, thinking that he had taken Christmas away from the Who's of Whoville. And something all of a sudden shocks him and surprises him and amazes him, because he thought he took everything about Christmas away from the Who's, but he hears that the Who's are still celebrating Christmas. He hears that they're still singing and celebrating. Dr. Seuss wasn't just a writer. Dr. Seuss was a philosopher. He wrote all of his stories with deep philosophy and meaning to them. And he ends the story of the Grinch in this way, and I love these lines. Speaking of Christmas here, when he was puzzled, he came to some conclusions. It says, Christmas came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages or boxes or bags. He puzzled and puzzled till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, is a little bit more. How can we get more out of Christmas this year when we think differently about the Messiah? Number one, someone or something is always ruling over your heart. There is no time in your life when someone or something is not ruling over your heart. Your heart is not neutral. It picks one thing or the other, one side or the other, one king or another king, one kingdom or even perhaps yourself. And so the first thing I want to say on how we can get more meaning out of Christmas is don't confuse the king with the thing. Christmas reminds us not to confuse the one true king with a thing. Micah 5 begins with a comparison of two kings. One king who was besieged, taken off into exile, and killed by the Babylonians. And another king who is yet to come, who would rescue his people and bring them back into the land. King Zedekiah was captured and blinded. The eternal king will liberate and give sight to the blind. One king is weak and helpless. The other king is strong and ideal. and universal. One king gave up their great city, the other king is their greatest hope for salvation. Whatever rules your heart will exercise an inescapable influence over your life and behavior. Whatever rules your heart will exercise an inescapable influence over your life and behavior. So before you trust in an idol, Christmas reminds us to take a look at our heart. Jesus said, "Where your treasure is, there your heart is also." And so this Christmas, I want you to ask yourself a few questions. Am I ruling my life, or am I allowing the King to rule my life? Am I sitting on the throne of my heart, or am I allowing God to sit on the throne of my heart? Have I given Jesus completely everything about me, my ambitions, my will, and my desires? Or am I giving that to myself and building my own kingdom? To get more out of Christmas, don't confuse the king with a thing. Number two, to get more out of Christmas, you must find peace in a person. To get more out of Christmas, you must find peace, not in a present, but actually in a person. Some of you might desperately want peace this year for Christmas. Some of you want peace in your life. Some of you guys have a relationship that you desperately want peace in. Some of you want peace at work, peace in your home, peace in your marriage, peace with your family. If you're sitting out there and you say, "Man, I could care less about tinsel and Teslas. I really want peace," I can resonate with that. You don't care about the latest iPhone, iPad, AirPod, iMac. I just want peace from God. I want peace for my family. Absolutely. Some of you have probably tried seeking peace in 100 different ways and 100 different times, and you've come out with 100 different results because of that. To get more out of Christmas, you must find peace in a person. Look very carefully at Micah verse 5, chapter 5. He, the Messiah, he shall be their peace. A person is your peace. Not a circumstance, not a solution, not a philosophy, not an idea, not a thing, not a present. A person is the greatest peace that you could ever ask for. You can have peace, the peace of God, and you can have peace with God. But first, you got to have peace from God. You can never have peace with God or peace of God if you do not have peace from God. God has made a way for peace. He's made a way for us to have a peaceful relationship with him, even though we don't deserve it. We're sinful, we're finite, we fail, we sin all the time. And the way that he made peace for us was by sending his son, Jesus, to die on a cross for us. I want you to turn from Micah, and we're going to finish in Matthew chapter 2. And as I read this, I think Derek's going to come on up here, and we'll just sing a little bit of a song that we'll be singing more of tonight by candlelight. In Matthew chapter 2, verse 1, these verses out of Micah are quoted, directly fulfilled and referenced through the person of Christ and his birth in Bethlehem about 2,000 years ago. Matthew 2 says this: "After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, 'Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star, and we have come to worship him.' When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him, and assembling all the chief priests and the scribes and the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born, and they told him, 'In Bethlehem of Judea, for it is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel.'" The promise of Micah chapter 5 is fulfilled in the birth of Jesus. He came and he brought peace to the earth. He brought a peaceful relationship, and he did it in a very specific way. God sent his son, Jesus, as a man, 100% God and 100% man, to the earth to live a perfect life. He was sinless. He did what none of us could do. He lived a life that was always pleasing to the Father. He was so absorbed and obedient to the Father's will that he never, ever sinned. Humanity nailed him to a cross, convinced that he was trying to overthrow their human government, convinced that he was a usurper of the Roman throne. They nailed him to a cross. His blood was shed for the forgiveness of sins, and 3 days after he rose from the grave. It was the Father's sign that the sacrifice of Jesus was acceptable. He did it all for us, not because we deserve it, not because we can earn it in any way. He did it as a gift to us. It was a gracious, merciful gift of the Father to send Jesus to do for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. And because of what Jesus has done, now we, sinners, hostile against God, enemies of God, are loved by God and accepted by God through Christ. Christmas, it puzzles me. It shouldn't. How can one day have so much significance? Because it brought peace between us and God the Father through Jesus Christ. Let's pray.